Hey, what's happening, everybody? Robert Phoenix here, broadcasting to you live from Fredericksburg as the Titanic full moon in Sagittarius tries to make itself known through cloudy, slightly streaky, a little bit murky late spring skies here in the hill country. Perhaps we might see it. We saw it last night in all of its glory, getting to its super fullness in Sagittarius. What makes this full moon so interesting is the conjunction with Jupiter in the chart. And Jupiter is closer to Earth than it has been in quite some time. And in fact, if you look really closely, you'll actually see some moons around Jupiter. That's how close this Jupiter is. And with the moon conjuncting Jupiter, well, what we're talking about is incredibly expansive energy, incredibly expansive emotional energy, which can be really helpful in some areas of your life, especially if you're trying to get into deeper, broader, more philosophical patterns and more philosophical kinds of places inside yourself. It can be a bit unnerving in some ways because of the intense desire with Sagittarius to get to the truth. On the not so positive side of things, sometimes Jupiter can really just expand whatever emotion you've got going through or going on in your life. So if you've got joy in your life, I mean, people do experience joy. It's an emotion that is still available to the human race, believe it or not. Yeah, they have not made joy politically incorrect yet. They have not outlawed joy yet. Although I think they would like to do everything in their power to psychically dismantle joy. And that's a whole other discussion. But this is what the moon and Jupiter conjunction brings into our life. It brings an abundance of emotion. And in Sagittarius, it can be really positive. It could also be kind of righteously indignant at the same time, which is the nature of Sagittarius. And we're getting into the opposition of the sun in Gemini. And Gemini is all about the particulate, the fractal, microscopic pieces that are brought together to create the whole. Sagittarius is the whole. And tonight, I believe the moon is getting full and it's getting ready to conjunct the galactic center. And that's a pretty big conjunction. We can talk a little bit about the galactic center tonight. It's an interesting concept. And we'll get into that tonight. We'll get into more of this gigantic Jupiter full moon effect. I've also got some charts lined up for us tonight, some timely birthday charts. We'll look at the week ahead with the chart of the moment. And we'll also, towards the end of the program tonight, we'll get into the draconic chart a little bit. I'll show you how to rig it up on astro.com. And I'll begin to get into some of the dynamics of the draconic chart. I am going to be teaching a webinar, a one-day webinar on the draconic chart in July. And I'm going to be posting that shortly after the show, probably today or tomorrow. And I'll be reminding people next week. So I'm going to give you enough notice so that you can get in on this. And I think the draconic chart is one of the great outposts of astrology. And it's been often called the chart of the soul. Edgar Casey actually got into the draconic chart, and I do a fair amount of work with it when I work on something called the everything reading, where I use a lot of different systems and put them together like an accordion. And the draconic chart plays a pretty significant role in that. Anyway, I'll be working with that in much more depth in a webinar on a Saturday in July, upcoming July. So keep your eyes open for that. I'll have that on my website in the next couple of days. Also, we have a new Facebook group, and I want to thank Rob Chopra for suggesting this a couple of weeks ago. I caught him in the chat room during that time, and I thought about it. And Rob and I have been communicating a little bit, and I said, "Hey, do you want to do this?" And he said, "Yeah, I'd love to." Rob, being an Aquarian who has his sun in the 11th house, I thought this is a perfect fit. So Rob decided he wanted to do it. He started the group. Some of you have been invited already. If you haven't been invited, come on over. It's the 11th house. Ask for an invitation. You know, we'll bring you in, and we're gonna discuss stuff that we talk about on the show, and astrology in general. So I'm excited. It's the first kind of intentional group that I've really put together on Facebook. And I want to thank 11th House Rob for getting that going. So let's see who's showing up in the chat room tonight. We got Shari. It feels coo out right now. What the heck is happening? That's that that's the Moon Jupiter conjunction in Sagittarius. Hi, Ani. Kato, you're on time. There's Mary. Hi, Mary. Wild energy out there. Jupiter sky has been bright and beautiful. I know, right? Jupiter and the Moon are rocking. They're just so close together right now. No wonder we can neither sleep nor stay awake. Oh, that's funny. I had a hard time sleeping last night, too. Judy says, my daughter's birthday is tomorrow, and she just put down, oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, man. What a rite of passage that is, huh? You got to put down a 16-year-old dog just before your birthday. That is, I'm so sorry for that, man. Hey, Joni, nice to see you. Stephen chiming in. Happy Father's Day to all the fathers who did not get caught. We can talk a little bit about Father's Day, too. Hi, Joe. There's Luann. What's going on, Luann? We got 26 people in here. I'm sure as the evening goes on, we'll get more and more kind of drifting in, showing up. You know, some really interesting stuff is, in fact, it came out during the month of Gemini. Go figure. Okay. So this is funny, or maybe not. Because we've been doing, people have got hooked into these 23andMe's and Ancestry.com and all this stuff. They've recently found that up to 20% of the men who have done those tests have found out that they are not the fathers of their children. 20%. That is significant. That's kind of a big number, 20%, if you can believe the number, okay? I don't know. I mean, sometimes we got to take some of the stuff with a grain of salt. You know, some of these drastic headlines, but 20% is a lot. And I thought during the month of Gemini, of course, we would have this information, because that's what Gemini brings us, right? It brings us information. There are some signs that I think are really connected to science in ways that other signs aren't directly connected to science. I think Gemini is one of them. I think Aquarius is another very scientific sign, and Virgo is another, of course, analytical and scientific sign. And the reason why Aquarius tends to be, of course, very scientific and super detached, right? Can look down on things and theoretically be objective. Oh, by the way, somebody asked me if this was a Masonic ring. No. In fact, let me show you the ring. This is interesting. It's a guy riding a horse. I don't know if you can see that, right? So it's a little Sagittarian thing going on with the horse. And this was a ring that my father made. My father was an amateur jeweler. So happy Father's Day to you, Dad, wherever you are, wherever you're sailing across the sky. My father was, he was a Leo, born August 1st, and he was one of these guys. He was really a prototypical Leo. His hobby life was way more important to him than his professional life. Some of you have seen this ring. This is another ring he did. This one he actually cast from a mold. So this was a wax mold. He cast it. He also did the background stuff, right? He did that. This he actually did himself. He carved this himself. So he was really into the lost wax casting method, and he was always on to some hobby, right? He was always doing, like, you know, he was teaching himself Spanish. He was really ahead of everybody with like computerized chess games. He loved to play computerized chess against the computer. He was kind of a sort of, how do I say this, minor league inventor. He didn't invent anything that was really significant, but he made things. He had a great mind for visualizing. He had Mercury and Cancer. And he could do stuff like landscaping and gardening and building. He could fix shit. But he was great at this stuff, really great. Later on, he got into photography in a big way. He got into old photographs, single lens reflex cameras. He was big on that for a while. And then he got into machining stuff. So he started to actually make his own bullets. He got into target practice and guns, and would go down to the range and fire. And in fact, was actually in the process of making his own gun. Like, he was boring it out with, I mean, it was kind of incredible stuff. And then he got sick and he couldn't complete that process, you know. But he was somebody who worked to live and not live to work. And it was really unfortunate, you know, sometimes, and this is where individuation and astrology is really helpful, because sometimes we get all these voices in our heads about what we should be doing, what we should be doing. And I can't tell you how many times I heard my grandmother, whom I love dearly, complain about my father. You know, he wasn't living up to his potential, wasn't living up to his potential. Well, his potential really wasn't all that worldly. His potential was in his creative pastimes. He was a Leo. That's what he did. Maybe they just should have laid off of him, because he had a ton of pressure coming at him from people, you know, all over his life to like do something. And really the best thing he could have done was just work and explore and build. He was a kind of a Hephaestus, sort of volcanic figure, the forge of the underworld. And that was my father. He was very interesting. And one of his other hobbies was he loved sailing. He was a big sailor. He taught himself how to sail. He taught himself the knots and all the stuff, could read charts. So my father was an autodidactic. He taught himself all these different things. And then I just a little shout out to my son tonight, who in the Father's Day tradition, my son, who perhaps someday will carry on the role of being a father in this lifetime. He just left yesterday to do a 2-week outward bound sailing excursion off the coast of Maine. So he's kind of carrying on the sailing, the Argo archetype, the Argonaut archetype of my father. So shout out to him. Stay safe, stay conscious, and really enjoy your time out there as you embark on your adventure. And what's interesting too is my son has a 5th house Sagittarius. So this full moon tonight is in his 5th house of pleasure and hobbies. And it could be really interesting for him. So anyway, we got the father stuff out of the way, Father's Day stuff out of the way. And for all you dads who unexpectedly found out that your child was not yours through 23andMe or Ancestry.com, well, happy Father's Day anyway, because you helped raise a kid, whether you knew it was yours or not. Sometimes that stuff is really crazy, you know, with kids and in childbirth, and finding out that that your paternal father is not your father. So a good friend of mine, and look, this story is public. He writes about it in his book. It's called Out of Babylon. It's by my friend Richard Grossinger. Richard was raised in the Grossinger family. Some of you probably are familiar with Grossingers. Maybe you watched the movie Dirty Dancing. Dirty Dancing was based on Grossingers, that resort in the Catskills, right? So his family owned one of the most famous resorts during that time and era, the 50s, early 60s. And Richard, now I'm not divulging anything that Richard hasn't written about. He's a Scorpio. He's very confessional. He's a great guy. It's a Father's Day story. It's a twisted Father's Day story. But Richard's mother was dying of cancer, and she pulled Richard's father aside on her deathbed and told Richard's father that Richard was not his son, and that Richard's father was actually apparently a porn actor, which is, you know, works for a Scorpio, right? So upon hearing this, his father disowned him. And that's the Out of Babylon part. So Richard had this very rich upbringing, very privileged in a lot of ways, and this weird kind of scorpionic twist of fate. Deathbed, right? Scorpio, the mother, basically says, "Please forgive me. That's not your kid." I mean, why would you do that? I don't quite, you know, it's like you had plenty of time to do that. Maybe you wanted to like have a word with God before you did that, but I guess she was trying to absolve herself of her guilt and her sins. Anyway, it sets him off on a journey, which is really fascinating, because had that not happened, he wouldn't have had his life. And Richard became a really successful publisher. Eventually moved from the East Coast to California, took up Tai Chi, metaphysics, and I think Richard's one of the most brilliant writers and researchers of the 20th century, somebody who probably will not get his due. And every time, I haven't talked to him in a while, but every time I do, he's sharing really wild and interesting stories with me. In fact, Richard, you're probably not watching this, but I do miss you, and I am wishing you a very, very happy Father's Day. He has a daughter who's really talented and successful. Her name is Miranda July. She's a director. She's a movie director. Some of you may know who she is. Anyway, that's an interesting paternity story, a dark one, a scorpionic one at that. Where else are you going to find this information? Right here in the 11th house on Sunday Nights with me. Anyway, welcome everybody. We're now officially into the show. We're about 15 minutes in. And let me check in on you guys and see how you are all doing here. Let's see. Whoa, this is interesting. Love the movie. I'm glad I got rid of my parents. They were terrible. Virgo here. Sometimes you got to leave them. I know that sailing expedition is very cool. Thanks, Luann. Shauna says, Maine, my home. Pops has Bill's birthday today. Laugh out loud, very similar temperament and charm. Let's see what else. Bill Clinton's a Leo. That's right, he is. Yep, he is. What else do we have here? My daughter is a Gemini, Sag rising. Oh, so she's getting that full moon, right? Sagittarius full moon is not good for Gemini. Generally, no, it can be challenging. It makes Gemini stretch. Let's put it that way. Makes Gemini stretch. What else do we have? Let's see. My grandparents were Leo and Cancer. They belted each other to pieces. That's interesting, Leo and Cancer. You'd wonder if they would have some kind of, converging planets because they're so close together. Maybe a Mercury or maybe a Venus, something like that. I had a Cancer. Let's see, my grandfather, my mother's side was he was a Virgo, and her mother was a Cancer. So same deal on the opposite side, and that didn't go very well. Grandma was kind of a crabby Cancer, and then on my father's side, my step grandfather and my grandmother, well, they were a Leo and a Taurus, and man, I never saw two people fight more in my life. They were always yelling at each other. And of course, fixed sign, totally fixed sign with that Taurus and Leo stuff going on. Anyway, interesting, very interesting. So on my father and my mother's side, my father had a full moon, a new moon, and almost a new moon in Virgo since he was a Leo. And then my mother had a full moon in Virgo. So they had the kind of complementary moon thing going on. They were both in the same sign. But they would do funny shit with those Virgo moons. They would bond together with the Virgo moons, and they would become friends with people, and then nobody was good enough for them in a lot of ways. Like they would always find some kind of foible or fault because so they would bond together with those very critical Virgo moons. And then they would like excommunicate friends with those Virgo moons. I'd see that all the time. It was fascinating to watch. All right, let's see what else we got going in the chat room. And then we're about to jump into the chart of the moment. I've got that Sagittarius mutable talkability. You bet your ass I do. Jupiter in Sagittarius, first house. Yo, Semper Fi. Right now, the moon is conjunct my natal Jupiter. How about that? Good night. It's a good night for me. Maybe I'll talk too much. I don't know, but it's good. And I also have Jupiter trine Uranus in my chart. So I like that. It's not bad. But I got a T-square with Sun and Mars. It's interesting. Keeps things alive. All right, let's get into the chart of the moment. Let me go over to astro.com. We got some interesting charts tonight, by the way. Let's see what we got here. Astro.com. I wonder if I have to change my reference point. I'm going to have to change my reference point. Let me just get in here for a little bit. Let's see what we got going on. The reference point today is Orlando, Florida, because I was doing some relocation with a client. Let's check this out here. So let's go Fredericksburg. Getting back to that Gemini Sagittarius dynamic. I've talked about this before. Steve Bannon and Donald Trump are opposite signs. And they've got that Gemini Sagittarius thing going on, even though Trump is born on that lunar eclipse in Gemini. And Steve Bannon actually helped Trump get elected. Make no mistake about it. He wasn't the cause of it, but he helped him get elected. He connected Trump into the populist potentiality. The potentiality of populism is a popular proposition. Okay, here we go. Let's get into the chart of the moment. There it is, boys and girls. We've got Scorpio on the ascendant, right? And there's that full moon. We're not quite there yet. Later on this evening, though, she's going to be creeping up and going into full-on opposition with the sun in Gemini. What's interesting, Judy, is that, you know, I know you're in Texas. So right now, you know, the Gemini sun tonight has been in the 8th house. And of course, that gets into, you know, that house that represents death and passing and transformation and the shadow. So that's super interesting. It's right there right now. This is where we're at. This is in Texas. And this is what your daughter would be theoretically experiencing right now in the 8th house. So in the chart of the moment, she's right here. You know, she's in this gateway. So very interesting stuff. And again, condolences. You know, when I had my dog, I had to put him down when he was 15. I don't know if you guys have experienced this with pets. When they're, you know, when they're on the deep fade and you're thinking, God, I got to do something. I got to do something. I got to put this animal out of its misery. You know, I mean, it's just the way it is. And every time I would have that thought, my dog would kind of rebound for a couple of days. Be like, you know, somehow, you know, the telepathic thing was on. We've been here 15 years. He knew. He's like, oh shit, you know, this guy's going to pull the plug. I better wag the tail a little bit, you know. And he would do this. This went on for a couple of weeks. And I go, God, every time. But then he would like descend again. And sometimes the descents would be even worse. But he managed to do that for a couple of weeks. And I said, you know, look, man, I really appreciate your valiant effort here, but we're going to have to do something. So what are we talking about? Right out of the gate, we're talking about death. We're talking about sex. We're talking about paternity. We're talking about birth, right? Scorpio is birth and it is conception. Scorpio's conception, which is birth. If you believe birth, life starts at conception, right? Which I believe is the spark of life. That's my belief. It may not be yours. That's okay. But that's what we're talking about. So we're talking about death and birth and fathers and all kinds of stuff. And it's right there, right on the ascendant. And that's where it's at. We got that Moon-Jupiter conjunction, powerful. Could be a little crazy out there. I've been in the house most of the day, by the way. I've been lounging about and watching Naked and Afraid. And, you know, painting my body, pretending I'm out in the wild. No, that's not true. But I've just been chilling out. I like to take Sunday as a day off. I did do a reading today for a very, very good friend who's going through a Saturn-Pluto transit of their 12th house. Very intense, but good. Good news on that front. Things are changing, right? It's a very intense transit. And so just chilling out today. But we do have this interesting inconjunct going on right now. And it is really happening right now. Because, of course, a couple hours from now, the moon will be out of inconjunction. And so when we get the inconjunct, we're trying to understand the nature of Cancer and the role that Mercury and, well, the true node, right, which is interesting, and Mars are having on this full moon moment. And so just from kind of the you know, the in the moment, I guess you may, horary, soon to be mundane interpretation is that I've been going backwards in time, which is very Cancerian, looking back on my relation with my father, my kid Richard's father. So there's a lot of Cancerian just like dialogue at the beginning of tonight's show, but I think in a larger perspective, right? Because the moon rules Cancer. It is the de facto ruler of Cancer. So when we have this inconjunct going on, of course, there's going to be this kind of broken path leading us back to our roots, leading us back to our memories, leading us back to where we experience emotional influence in our lives. And in the eighth house, it generally tends to represent our genetic code, our DNA. You know, the eighth house is an interesting house because it does represent inheritance. When you go through, when somebody dies, what are they doing? They're leaving you, you know, their things. They're not your things. That's the second house. The second house is your money, your assets, your goods. The eighth house is other people's money, their assets, their goods. So when they pass away, that's the eighth house, right? Other people's money, wills, testament, investiture, along those lines. But I think it goes deeper than that. I also think that the eighth house represents what goes on in your DNA. You know, where you know, what's imprinting you. You know, what the generations before you have influenced or imprinting upon your own life, right? So I think you can get interesting insights into the eighth house. So I would say my eighth house, which is dominated by the sign of Cancer, a little bit of Leo, that probably my mother's or my maternal line would be influencing me more in a lot of ways because of the nature of Cancer over there. So you may want to look at what's over them. Everybody's going to have Cancer in the eighth house, but the sign that does define your eighth house can give you some clues about what you're dealing with in terms of your ancestral patterns and your genetic code. It's a really interesting house. And so with this in conjunct tonight, I think what we're doing here is we're looking at discussing, talking about, and even when you go to sleep tonight, if you can fall asleep, you might be dreaming, or you might be moving into spaces where you're having images or themes or narratives pop up with family members or from your childhood, or pieces that, you know, are familiar to you in terms of growth and nurturing. Sometimes, you know, they don't always have to be pretty. Sometimes it can be about stunted growth. Sometimes it can be about areas of your life where maybe you feel like you missed a step, theoretically in your own mind, or you missed a turn. And there can be, with the in conjunct, clues that come up. They can be missing pieces of a puzzle. They could be the missing pieces of the puzzle that you've been working on for a while. And they're right here, and you could possibly get them, you know, over the course of, who knows, maybe I'll say something tonight, or maybe you'll get off of this stream and you'll think about it and write things down. It's an interesting time. Very interesting. And this in conjunct is going to be going on for a couple of days, right? Because we have Mercury here, you know, moving tomorrow, it'll be at 20 Cancer. So it's within that 3-degree zone. You know, the in conjuncts are 150-degree angles, but the max is about a 3-degree orb. So they, you know, Cancer and Jupiter have nothing to do with each other. And yet at that 150, 149, 148-degree angle, they have a relationship. And so at the impetus here is to find out what the relationship is. It is the pathless path. And we're going to have this energy for a couple of days, right? Mars is going to be around there. Mercury's going to be around there. So it's not just tonight, not just your dreams, but over the course of the next couple of days. Now, Jupiter is the big picture. You know, Jupiter allows you to you know, get on top of Mount Olympus and look down on everything. You know, it's the ruler of the ninth house, which theoretically, you know, is the highest point of the chart, theoretically, right? So when we have this aspect with the quincunx, or the in conjunction with this aspect, it allows us to have a localized perspective, to have a more familial, at times sentimental, familial, tribal perspective, and have the two somehow kludged together. So we're talking, you know, the big idea with the deeper emotional application. Does that make sense? And this is going to be going on for a couple of days. Now, here's what's interesting, okay? Here's what's interesting. I'm going to take it up. I'm going to bump it up now to a mundane level. So On Thursday, just before Friday, which I've now dubbed False Flag Friday, triple F, because that's when the false flags tend to go down. We had this thing happen in Oman, in the Straits of Hormuz. The Straits of Hormuz. Would you like to see the Straits of Hormuz? Step right over here. I will show you. That's what it sounds like to me. Anyway, so we had this thing happen, right? And of course, Mike Pompeo, and you cannot believe a fucking word that comes out of that guy's mouth. Anytime. If he says something, it's the opposite. Okay? Just put it through the decoder. Him and John Bolton, anytime they say something, it's the opposite. Of course we do. Oh, wow. They're going to blame this on Iran. They're going to blame it on Iran. And of course, they're blaming it on Iran. Iran did this. Why? Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Why, if Iran was in the crosshairs of the United States and its best friend, biggest ally in the Middle East, why would they do that? It's kind of like you're in the cage with a bear, and the bear sitting over there minding its own business, you know, eating something. You go over to the bear, you poke the bear. Hey, fuck you, bear. Right? And all of a sudden the bear goes, oh, yeah, I better take care of this. Why would you do that? You're trying to avoid war at all costs. You know, and what's happening now is the bullshit meter is getting finely attuned inside of people. Finely attuned. And this is, I think, what we have here. I think this in conjunct, because we're dealing with what? The ocean, we're dealing with basically nautical boundaries, nautical lines. Japan was involved in this thing, a foreign country, the United States, the Straits of Hormuz, very Sagittarian stuff. Of course, here we have all this Cancerian material, which is the United States, right? The United States is what, around 16 degrees Cancer, if I'm not, or 14 degrees Cancer. So this is all very unique. And by the way, when that thing happened, Mercury was right at the same degree position orb as the US sun. Okay, so who's this pointing at? Yeah, that's right. That's right. This thing that happened, and what we're trying to achieve now is some level of objective truth, which theoretically Sagittarius can bring. But the inconjunct gives us some clues. It's like, okay, what's really going on here? Who is behind this? And it's weak. That was the most weak ass picture, the most weak ass false flag assertion, but they're going to bang that drum and they're going to try to, you know, drum the case where they're going to, you know, do what they want to do to Iran, which is huff and puff and blow their house down. This to me is part of the mundane relationship to that inconjunct. You've got your own version of it in your own way, right? All right, we've got T-squares going on too. We have we got this Neptune. Again, what are we dealing with now? The ocean, Neptune and Pisces. Now we're really getting into the oceanic kinds of metaphors. Neptune squaring Jupiter. We've been talking about this Jupiter-Neptune square for a while now, and it is nothing but lies, 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 fabrication. You know, it's really interesting too, getting into this Neptune-Jupiter thing. We're also into religion. You know, this is a very kind of religious aspect, right? Both Pisces and Sagittarius are signs that are connected into religion. I believe Pisces being more esoteric and Sagittarius being more exoteric. Pisces being more unorthodox, Jupiter being more orthodox. And so we have this clash going on. And this thing around vaccinations and measles and laws, right, are also kind of in this mix. And some of the biggest, I don't want to call them culprits, but really the center of the storm with the vaccination thing is the Hasidic community in New York, inside the city in upstate New York. And these people are not into vaccinations. They're not into vaccinating their kids. You know, it's like, I get it, right? By the way, the Hasidim have always reminded me of like the Amish on acid. They're kind of similar, right? They have kind of like very austere, sort of similar structures in terms of their belief system, super orthodox. They both have kind of long, dready hair. They both wear the kind of black hatty thing. Both very secretive and closed communities. Both kind of living in the 18th century, right? In some ways, I think they're very, very similar. And the Amish don't vaccinate, and boy, they're doing okay. They've been around for a long time, haven't they? You know, but I think the Hasidim are kind of extreme, a little extreme. The Amish don't wear little Saturnian black cubes attached to their heads, at least not to my knowledge, right? But they're very similar in some ways. But now they're shutting down. So New York came out and they basically passed a vaccination. Like, you cannot have religious or philosophical deferments from physicians or from your rabbi. You can't do that now. New York has rubber stamped this thing. Cuomo's, right? So we can kill your baby up to about 9 months. But oh, by the way, once you have your kid, like, you can do that. This is the madness around vaccines. You can do that. You can say, okay, well, just about it's showtime. You can take it out, and then we can disassemble it and process it. But once that baby's born, oh, no. You got to do what we tell you, right? You got to vaccinate that little boy or little girl, because we're going to tell you to do that. But up until that, oh, you can do anything you want. You go ahead. Your choice. Isn't that weird? I mean, shit like this, makes life on Earth crazy. Crazy. Oh, yeah. Go ahead. Take it out. Take it out. Oh, you got a kid now? That kid's ours. Should have taken it out before you had the chance. Okay, now we got the kid. I mean, that's kind of the mindset, right? I know it's kind of dark, but that's the mindset. Anyway, these Orthodox Jews, the Hasidim, they're pissed. They're really pissed. And guess what else they're doing? They're shutting down their schools. They're shutting down their schools. Now, these people, they're very different, right? They're very different than, say, the Zionists. And they are even different than the Chabad crew. These are hardcore, like, they're not into the Zionists. They don't like them. They see the Zionists as being statists and political, and they're not political. They got something else going on, right? But this is a community that has a lot of power and they have a lot of money because they're at the center of the diamond trade, okay? The center of the diamond trade. They basically are they're the Hermes, right? They are the messengers of the diamond trade, moving diamonds back and forth from Antwerp and South Africa and some of the other, like, where's another diamond center? Is it Dubai? There's another diamond center. Anyway, they've got money, man. They got resources. And the state of New York has taken them on. So here we go. Remember now, Jupiter is law. Jupiter is law. Jupiter is the concoction of law. Capricorn is the execution of law. And the two work hand in glove. So now we have the state. And man, is the state really, really reaching back. The state's really rolling up its sleeves, especially in New York City. So we're going to make this, right? And even if you go down into the South, states are getting really hardcore with their laws, especially around right to life, abortion. North of the Mason-Dixon line, they're going in the other direction, right? So these laws are being enacted, but this has to do with vaccines. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens. And again, when we talk about Neptune and Pisces, what is Pisces? It's fluids, it's inoculations, right? And now we've got Jupiter squaring off against that. And this is a religious and philosophical battle. And it's going to be very interesting to see what happens. Very, very interesting. And there's more, obviously. That's just one little slice of the pie that we're dealing with here, right? But we've been in this ongoing kind of battle and schism between Jupiter and Sagittarius. Like, here we go, big picture. And then Neptune getting really blurry and smudgy and not being able to sort through these things, or some sort of gross or mass manipulation. I mean, even the freedom of speech stuff, right, on YouTube or on Facebook. You know, this is Jupiter, right? We want to be able to express ourselves, you know, for better or worse. You know, and then we have Neptune and Pisces coming in and saying, no, you're not going to do that, right? Anti-Defamation League, you know, which theoretically is another kind of public interest, quasi-religio group, right? We got them in all across the board. You know, you can find them over on the Christian side, you can find them on the Jewish side, you can find them on the Mormon side. These are groups. These are very, very powerful groups and lobbies. And the ADL happens to be one of them, right? And the ADL, started by Abe Foxman. Abe Foxman's a rabbi, okay? So we're coming in again with sort of the Neptunian, Piscean stuff. And again, there's a clash. It's like, no, you're not going to be able to talk about what you want to talk about. You know, we're going to have very broad definitions of it. So even if you run up against, you know, the third rail, we're going to kick you out of here. We're going to shut it down. So this is another part of this debate. It's going to be ongoing. This is not going to cease anytime soon. And with the retrograde motion of Jupiter, right, a lot of these quote unquote rights that are inalienable, or at least the ones that we think they are, especially on the internet, or the internet is a whole different beast and platform in and of itself, they may go away. Because that's the nature of Jupiter retrograding, right? Things are getting removed. Now Jupiter will go direct again, but what are things going to look like once it does go direct and move forward? Are we going to get these things back? Usually when stuff is taken away, it never comes back again. You know, oh, you can keep your insurance. You can keep your health insurance. Yeah, right. Have you tried to get your health insurance back? No. Once stuff is taken away, this is what people have to remember. Once things are taken away, very hard to recover them. Very, very, very difficult. Very difficult. You know, so what else do we have? We got the opposition to the sun, Gemini, yep. And so what we're talking about is with Gemini, very localized. Gemini is the local perspective, it's microscopic perspective. It's facts, or at least, how do I say this? Ideas or thoughts that are presented as facts, okay? Sagittarius is the truth. It's the truth. So we get to sort out what's a fact and what's a truth. Take somebody like Bill Nye, the science guy. He might present you with a fact. Here's a fact. Oh, really? Yes, it's a fact. But just because Bill Nye, the science guy, presented you with a fact, that doesn't make it a truth or truth in general. No. It's somebody who theoretically is accredited that presents you with a fact. Now, sometimes a fact and a truth they live together under the same roof. You know, they're buddies. Facts and truth can be buddies. But sometimes they're not. You can get a fact and it's a wrong fact. Where you could have an overarching truth, you could have that, and you try to apply it as a fact, and it may not work. People may not want to hear it. You know, oh, really? That's I don't believe that. Well, I just gave it to you. It's a fact. I don't believe it. Well, it's true. I don't believe it. And sometimes you can be so convinced of your truth, like Bill Nye, you can present it as a fact, and it could be a fallacious truth, if there can be indeed a fallacious truth. You can see this a lot of times in religion. You know, especially they present things as fact. Quite often they're not, because they're based on some truth, at least the truth that they perceive. Doesn't always work out that way, right? You remember that guy back in, was it 2009, 2010. He was from California. Said the world was going to end. Well, he presented that as fact because that was the truth. He believed it didn't end. What about John Hagee? All those blood moons, the tetrad moons. He had a New York Times bestseller on that. These were facts that were coming from his interpretation of the Bible as biblical truth. Well, we're still here. Now, the world as it is probably a very different place, but we're still here. So this is an interesting dynamic of facts versus truth. Kind of got into the Gemini side of things there, dissecting it. That's how it works. Then we have the Sun-Neptune square. That's kind of moved on. That's a 7-degree. What is a 7-degree orb? Tomorrow will be 8 degrees. So that sun is moving on. When the sun does move into Cancer, we're 5 days away from that. And that, by the way, is going to be the solstice, right? We're kicking into the summer solstice. That's when we get into that Sun-Neptune trine. Well, I'm sorry. It'll be a ways off. It'll be towards the middle part of Cancer, right? Right around the 4th of July. And that's going to be right around that big solar eclipse that we have coming on the 6th. So we have the Sun-Neptune trine. That'll be that the energy around that is how do I say it? It's a bit less confrontational. Let's put it that way. There's more flow there with the sun going to trine with Neptune. We are dealing with Saturn, Pluto in opposition to Mars. In a couple of days, we're going to have that Mars-Pluto opposition. I don't like it. Not a fan. I'm not a fan of a Mars-Pluto opposition. For at least on a mundane level, like on a global level, to me, that's, again, we're dealing with, it could be like homegrown violence, white terror. I mean, all that bullshit. I can just kind of see this creeping up here with a Mars-Pluto opposition. By the way, whatever happened to that guy from Pittsburgh, Robert Lee Bowers? Has that guy been tried? Does anybody know where he is? Did he ever exist? What about this kid down in San Diego and Poway? When is his trial going to start? Just when, everything starts to cool and the smoke clears, this Mars-Pluto opposition comes into play. It's an intense opposition, really intense. And that Mars in Cancer is kind of, it can jump to conclusions. Mars in Cancer can jump to conclusions. Got to watch out for it. I've had to deal with that in my life with Mars in Cancer. I've had to kind of throttle back in my Mars a little bit. It can jump to conclusions. So we get in this Mars-Pluto opposition. There's going to be a lot of energy jumping out there, coming to. And by the way, this is now a pastime on the internet. People are jumping to conclusions all the time now, all the time. I just got done watching the Warriors versus the Toronto Raptors, and Kevin Durant got hurt. And all these sports pundits, players, and people were like screaming at the Warriors, and they're saying, "Oh, it's the Warriors' fault, and the Warriors did this, and the Warriors did that." And there's this weird, you could tell it was kind of like, like a ship that was just kind of drifting into the sea of wokeism, right? And they just so wanted to like make the Warriors, this oppressive, cultural, demonic force run primarily by so-called white guys, making, this, forcing, oppressing this multi-millionaire, probably soon to be billionaire Kevin Durant to play basketball. That's what you heard. That's what we heard. That's what I saw. I see it on TV shows, sports talk shows, the internet, pointing the blame at the Warriors. Now, first of all, the Warriors have a serious investment in this guy. Huge investment. They want him back on the team. They want a healthy guy back on their team. They've got doctors. And by the way, Kevin Durant, he's got a manager and an agent. You think that guy wants to have his biggest asset blow out his freaking Achilles? Really? That guy's his meal ticket. His meal ticket. And this is not your average dude. This guy, studied under Jay-Z and, Rockefeller and their sports agency, right? And, he's going to, You know, this guy's coming up from the streets. Theoretically, he's not going to sacrifice his asset. No, they all got together and they made an informed decision. Kevin said, I can play, and he went out and played. And he owned it. He had a big tweet and he owned it. But what does the media do? The media jumps in. And again, we get into this Neptune square to Jupiter, you know, looking for blame, wanting to assign blame. You know, this is unfortunately one of the symptoms of our time, which is assigning blame. We all get into it, right? We get into it. It's part of the conspiratorial mindset in some ways, right? It's part of seeking truth, because if shit is wrong, then there's got to be somebody who's responsible for the shit being wrong. And that's where we go and say, okay, well, there's this, and there's this, and there's this, and we untie this, and we untie that, and we pull the curtain back, we go, aha, we found out who did this. And even when we do, quite often the media isn't that responsive to it. In fact, they'll push their own narrative to find their own victim or their own perpetrator. Right? When did we see this? Most clearly, we saw this with Richard Jewell and what happened in Atlanta during the Olympics in 1996. I was there. I was there in Olympic Park, not far from it. Not far from it. I was maybe about 75 to 80 yards away from the event. The night that it happened, I didn't have anything to do with it. Trust me on that, right? Theoretically, it was this Eric, what's his name guy? That's a whole other story. Anyway, I was doing tarot readings down at the Olympics. And I was having a great day. I've told this story before. Great day, totally great day. And man, I'd gotten there on like, I think Monday or Tuesday, and I was trying to find my spot, and I finally found my spots. And by Friday, man, Atlanta was just on fire. It was a crazy scene too, because there were National Guard and all over the place. I mean, it felt like you were like walking around East Germany or something like that. But you know, while these people are walking around with semi-automatic weapons, you've got people, you know, on street corners with coolers of beer selling. It was like totally anarchic, and yet all these symbols of like the police state are just everywhere. It was the weirdest environment. So things were just hopping and humming. It was a great day. I think I made about $200 that day. And then all of a sudden, I'm done. Like, I'm done. I've had a great day. Let me get out of here. And I go to this bar, and I go to have a beer. And what do I see? I see all hell breaking loose, because there was an explosion in the Olympic Village. And Richard Jewell, who was the security guy, he was hired to, he actually intervened. He stopped it from being worse than it was. And then what happened? The media went after him, and they turned him into a villain. They turned him into a scapegoat, right? That was the narrative. You know, we wanted to find that guy, and there he was. And he fit a profile. Why? Because you go back and you look at the time, it was during the Clinton era, and they were on the precipice of passing the Anti-Terror Act. Because at that time, this was when the militias were starting to get popular. I've talked about this before. And man, the Clinton administration, they wanted to nip that shit in the bud. You know, we had Ruby Ridge with Randy Weaver. We had Waco. You know, we theoretically had, you know, Oklahoma City. I mean, they were just like, okay, look, we looked into the crystal ball, and we saw that people are going to be pissed off at us because, you know, we've got a sketchy past, right? And we're going to be doing stuff here over the course of the next 8 years, and we want a free runway. We don't want anybody putting up any kind of resistance. So they went after it. And right after this thing in Atlanta happened, they passed the Anti-Terror Act, and they put Richard Jewell's face on it. He was not responsible for that at all. In fact, there was a guy by the name of Lin Wood, Linwood, not Linwood. Lin Wood is his name, and he really thought that that he was guilty. He thought he was guilty, and it flipped his life around. And then he started to defend him, and he became a staunch supporter. And Richard Jewell wound up making money because his name was just totally besmirched. And he never, you know, never really reached anything beyond that. I think Clint Eastwood is rumored to be making a movie about Richard Jewell, right? But again, that's this obfuscation of truth. And they'll find the boogeyman, or they'll find the reason why something theoretically happened, but it's rarely that person, or really rarely that cause. Saturn-Pluto conjunction, we got it going on. We talked about that. We've talked about the sextiles to Neptune, which have been part of the conversation here. You want to change your life, you can. Neptune represents the vision. Neptune represents kind of the spiritual dimension and wanting to flow towards something that's profound and deep. And Saturn here in Capricorn says, if you want to have that, if you want to grow spiritually, you do it through a Saturnian sort of channel. So what does Saturn do? It limits. It limits. What can you limit? What can you give up? Can you give up a habit? Can you give up a food? Can you give up a thought? Can you give up an addiction, right? Can you give something up and that you limit yourself? It's the nature of Saturn, right? It's not Jupiter. Jupiter's different, right? We got the Jupiter square. That's a different kind. This is like no limits. But with Saturn, you put limits on it. When you do that, guess what? You grow spiritually. That's where we are. And this energy is going to be around. It's going to be around all the way up through the beginning of next year. So it's not like, you know, we're completely stuck or frozen. People can move. People can experience movement. You're going to have some discipline, some structure, some order, and you're going to have to limit that stuff. And when you have Saturn-Pluto conjunction, that's great because you can transform things. Pluto says, come on, you can transform this. And look, I try my best not to preach anything that I don't practice, right? If I'm preaching something or I'm talking about something, I do my best to be doing that thing. So, you know, I decided that I wasn't going to drink. And that's really paid off for me in a lot of ways. And with the Pluto-Saturn conjunction, also I've been going to the gym. I've really been trying to get my body back. And I tell you, man, you know, late 50s, it takes a while. It takes a while. But on the other hand, I'm getting clearer and growing. I'm trying to, you know, focalize and bring things together to be coherent and clear that John Trudell once shared with me. Anyway, you can do it. You can do it. This is a time of growth. But in order to grow, you have to practice some form of discipline and limitation. But you'll be rewarded spiritually as a result of this. We're talking long-term here. You know, and I've talked about this before. You know, we've been in such a realm of shortcuts. And sometimes shortcuts are okay. Like body hacks and, you know, those things are interesting to do things that you can kind of accelerate, you know, some processes. But this is not about a shortcut. This is about investing into something long-term and working at it day in and day out. And the payoff is Neptune. And you can grow spiritually and get a greater sense of perhaps faith in your life and facing your fears. You know, a lot of times Neptune can bring up fears as well. Just like Pluto brings up the fear of death, Neptune, with all of its phantasmagoria, can bring up the fear of the unknown. You know, look at just think about when theoretically, I mean, maybe some people still think this, but you know, back in the day when you set off to sail, people thought you'd fall off the edge of the earth, and you know that's how they drew their maps. Maybe the flat earthers still think that, but that was the fear of the unknown. It was very Neptunian, right? What's out there? What's beyond that? We can't see that. So that's the nature of Neptune. And with Saturn here, we can face our fears. And we face our fears with Pluto conjunction, right? We face them by taking out the things that root to us and propitiate and propagate our fears. That's how it works. By eliminating them, we eliminate the potential for fear. We move past them. Okay. What else we have? Oh, this is interesting. We have Uranus over here, which is just kind of hanging out there, right? It's sort of unaspected right now. That's interesting. Very, very interesting. The sun will come in and kick in a few days, begin to sextile it. But Uranus unaspected, well, we've got semi-sextiles and a quintile, stuff like that, right? And what are the sesquisquadrates? But when Uranus is unaspected from a mundane perspective, that's when weird things occur at a world level. Okay, so I'm going to tell a story that it's shocking. That's like this. Okay, this is a shocking story. And this is like Uranus is kind of hanging out there naked. Uranus is naked and afraid in the 6th house. So it was brought to my attention. You can look this up, but they're not reporting this up in the northern hemisphere. They're not reporting it down here. That there were 2 women in Brazil. They're lesbians, and they cut off their son's penis. You can look this up. Scour around. You'll find it on some religious sites. They cut off their son's penis. They wanted to sexually reassign him. 9 years old. Didn't go well. They killed him. They killed him. And I don't even want to get into the details of how they killed him, okay? But when I saw that, that was like fucking shocking. That's Uranus unaspected. Shocking. It's like, holy shit, really? This happened? So, and when we get into Taurus, right? What are we doing with Uranus and Taurus? We're hacking the form. We're hacking the form. Taurus is the body. And Uranus and Taurus is hacking the form. You know, it's radically altering the form. I'm not sure it's a great thing. In fact, I know it's not a great thing. It's not a great thing. Anyway, we have Venus here squaring off against Neptune. And that's just coming into square now. So the Venus-Neptune square is going to be going on for about 2 weeks. So we're dealing with the nature of relationship, duality, duplicity. Venus in Gemini is always about the other. You know, it's not about the other in the Libran sense. It's about the other that's reflected from you into the other. That's the nature of Gemini. It's a lot of sibling stuff with Venus here as well. And it also represents a relationship to your immediate environment, all of the 3rd house. So there's a lot of confusion here with Neptune. And it's this relationship with the Gemini thing. And I just talked about that Gemini thing a little bit. Is he a boy? Is he a girl? What's going on here? It's very Gemini in a lot of ways. Is it a fork or a spoon? It's sporky. You know, and the Neptune square is adding more confusion, more, you know, more rampant fear. There can be, you know, maybe somebody will say, oh, that's a crazy tale. Maybe that's not true. I'm just telling you, somebody showed that to me. And I saw it on a Brazilian website, okay? But that could be another, you know, another Venus-Neptune square, you know, finding your way through that. I mean, at some point, people are going to be shocked. They're going to be shocked. There's going to be an event that's going to shock them. And it could be an event so shocking and pivotal that it'll change a lot of ideas about kind of where we're headed, okay? And I'm not making any judgments. I'm just telling you, shocking. Maybe this will be the event. I don't know. The other thing with this false flag stuff is that I think they're going to step in some dew. They're going to step in some dew in one of these false flags. And it's going to come out. And people are going to cry wolf, and people are going to call bullshit. And that's when you got to be really careful, because that's when something else happens very quickly and then takes us out of that thing, right? Just as the, you know, the body of evidence is right there and it's warm, watch out for another event to take people and distract them, okay? But they're going to step in the dew. It's going to happen. And that's when theoretically, things can potentially be disassembled or deconstructed. It'll be a very interesting time. Very interesting. All right, let me check in with you guys in Chatlandia. See what we got going on in there. Let's see. We got Venus square Neptune splendid. That is so sad, so disgusting, making me think, do that child. I know, right? Yeah, it's true. It's true. Yep. Habits hard to break. Sometimes we don't see what is affecting us until we cut that self-imposed thing out. Coffee was making me feel super emotional and angry. Yeah, coffee is one of those things. You better treat coffee with respect. I have 1 cup a day. That's it. The Phoenicians started the flat Earth rumor. What else do we have? A lot of talk about silver, bioactive silver. Let's see. Cato says, an old friend messaged me, let's get trashed like the old days. I was like, honey, I do not trash myself. Good for you, Kate. Thanks for the happy Father's Day, Jan. Don't do stores, do your own. Nice to see you, Jan. What else do we have here? Tinctures. One of the things that I was overhearing the other night, let me go back to the screen share. One of the things I was overhearing the other night is the Ebola thing. Because apparently now it's gone from the DR to Uganda. Here we go, another Neptune square Jupiter, Neptune square moon. You guys want to track the Ebola? I'm not doling out fear. I'm just telling you, keep your eyes on it, right? It is in this locus right here, this ongoing square. Apparently ozone is good for dealing with Ebola. I'm not here to fearmonger, but it fits, right? We're dealing with Africa, Jupiter, Sagittarius, Neptune square. What's really going on? And we had a family, small mother and husband and wife. They're from Texas. They got on a plane, went to Fiji. They freaking died of Ebola in Fiji. Okay. Media's not talking about. I'm not here to fearmonger. I'm saying just look, be aware. And astrologically, I can easily make a case for that. Easily, right there. All right, let me get out of the stop share mode. Okay, we're back. And it's 8:20 here. You're watching the 11th house. I'm Robert Phoenix, and we've got the crew over there in Chatlandia. I wanted to bring up a couple of charts tonight. Let me see how I'm going to do this. Okay. So let's see. Let me just go over here for a second. Let me go here. Where do we go next? Let's see. Okay, so the 16th. The 16th, which is today, happens to be Tupac's birthday. There are a lot of rappers that are Geminis. Tupac, Kendrick Lamar, Andre 3000, Daryl Run McDaniels from Run DMC, Macklemore. Looks like Gemini happens to be a very rappy sign, right? Well, the 16th is Tupac's birthday. And have you guys ever seen the Tupac? So I can find the majority then. Have you ever seen the Tupac and Rihanna pictures? Have you guys seen these? I gotta show these to you since it's Tupac's birthday. So check this out. Like, how does this happen? How does this happen? So apparently, based on this story, Tupac is alive and well and living in Cuba. He's got a relative back from the old Black Panther days that's in Cuba. So Rihanna was not around when Tupac was alive. If she was, she might have been really, really young. That is clearly Rihanna. And this pretty much pop, right? So that to me is a very Gemini sort of thing, that, you know, Tupac might have even faked his death, that there would be a living Tupac and a dead Tupac, right? Remember the Tupac of the hologram? that was at Coachella. Here's another Tupac picture. And it's with Rihanna again. Check this out. Now, I don't know if this is a Tupac look-alike, right? Because, I don't know, it could be. But here she is. And he's got that trademark cross that he had. Look at that. Could it be? Is Tupac still alive? I wouldn't doubt it. I would not doubt that he's still alive. Anyway, Tupac, if you're out there, happy birthday, man. I hope life in Cuba is really, really good. Crazy, huh? Wild. Wildness. What do you guys think about that? I'm just curious. Let me get you back up here on chat. Where'd you guys go? Where's my chat? Where'd my chat go? Oh, you're over here? There you go. You guys think Tupac's alive? Somehow Cuba's always in the mix. Remember, they don't look very authentic to me. Maybe folk could be. I miss Tupac. Here's a link to the FB group. Thanks, Rob, for putting that in there. Madonna wants her underwear back. That's funny. Those pics look fake. Could be. Could be. All this back to the stars and the plans to teach us something new. It's tedious. It's tedious. Oh. Yeah, I guess. Could be. Could be. At the very least, under the sign of Gemini, gives you something to talk about and a place to go. Right? There's other options out there. You could be watching somebody else, a lot of other YouTube channels. Just thought I'd bring that up. Just thought I'd bring that up with Mr. Tupac. Let's see. What else did I want to bring up today? So the 17th is Stravinsky's birthday. I wanted to bring this up. So Stravinsky is the guy who wrote The Rite of Spring, right here. Here's Stravinsky. So The Rite of Spring is a really interesting event. And Steve and Chris and I really got into this. And it was kind of this really collaborative effort between Diaghilev, Sergei Diaghilev, who was like the creative director of this whole event known as the Ballet Russe, or the Russian ballet. And then you have Stravinsky, who is the composer. The set designer and painter was Nicholas Roerich, the mystic. And then the choreographer was George Balanchine. And all these guys in their own way were just absolute giants in their fields. And Stravinsky is this really interesting figure who goes from basically classical to neoclassical to the atonal scale. And in him and people like Schoenberg and Albanberg, they're the ones that create this, you know, kind of microtonal music where they start splitting notes, which is kind of concurrent with the splitting of the atom. It's all happening right around the same time. And the Rite of Spring brings atonality, which is what we're talking about, into this mix. Okay, so Stravinsky's birthday is tomorrow. So I thought it would be interesting kind of to look at Stravinsky's chart and the chart of the Rite of Spring, which happened back in 1913. So first of all, let me bring up Stravinsky's chart. It's a pretty interesting chart. So here's his chart, and he's got Sun in Gemini, Jupiter in Gemini, right in the midheaven, South Node in Taurus. A lot of Taurus in the 9th house. So remember, the name of the piece is the Rite of Spring. And look at all the planets he's got that represent spring in his chart. Neptune in Taurus, Saturn in Taurus, Chiron in Taurus, Pluto in Taurus, and even Jupiter and Sun in Gemini at this degree, there's still springtime. There's still spring signs and degrees. And then he has Vesta, the eternal flame, also in Gemini, and duality there, right? And then we shift into the solstice energy, and then Cancer, Leo, and then Virgo, right? Virgo, of course, being at the end of the summer period, summer phase. But he's got what we call a bundle chart. This is a bundle, and he's got basically 4 houses that are occupied by signs. And when you see people that have bundle charts, they tend to be very fixed and very focused on their purpose or what they're going through, right? There's no oppositions. In this case, there's one square that's Mars to all. This is an interesting square, by the way. And we'll talk about it in relationship to the Bride of Spring. The 11th house being group activity. And remember, that was like the super group. You know, that was like, I don't know, what was the super group of rock and roll? Wasn't the super group of rock and roll the group that came out of Cream? Maybe the Yardbirds were like the super group of rock and roll. But Diaghilev and Balanchine and Rorik and Stravinsky were like the super. Mars, very creative force in Leo, 11th house group activity. So he really was very 10th house oriented, focus driven. But what's interesting is that he really winds up getting into atonality. And atonality is where they split notes, right? And that's what Gemini does. It splits. It splits notes, right? Splits notes. And then, well, it does many things, but that's a function of Gemini, right? And then, if you look at the Rite of Spring, it's called the Ballet Russe. And what it is it's a kind of, it's a ritual. I'll show you a picture of it here. This is from one of Rorik's paintings. It's very tribal, right? You know, you almost get this kind of Slavic meets almost Native American kind of motif. And there's a maiden, a young maiden who's part of this tribe. And her job is to dance herself into a frenzy until she dies. So she becomes a sacrifice for her tribe, and thus the Rite of Spring, right? It is through her death that spring is enacted. And, you know, everything comes alive based on her death. And so the actual performance, you know, through the choreography and the music is the leading up to that moment. And then, of course, she collapses. But nobody had ever heard anything like this before. Nobody had ever heard or seen anything like this. It was wild. Even you know, Paris, who at that time was kind of liberal and ahead of everything, the people who saw it went nuts. And the thing that I found that was interesting about this in terms of Stravinsky's chart is the Cancerian piece. You know, because we've been talking about how Cancer is, you know, it's tribal, it's local, it's familial, it's cultural, right? It's very rootsy. So he's got this, right? He's sort of like channeling that Cancerian. He was very into Russia. He was very into his homeland, right? And so, and what does Cancer do? It looks backwards. So he's looking back into a kind of a more tribal, primordial time. Now, the Rite of Spring is interesting in that it really, in a lot of ways, kicks off the 20th century, even though it's 1913, which is a very pivotal time. And if the date sounds familiar, that's when we have the Federal Reserve. That's when we have, what else? Taxation. You know, we have the sinking of the Lusitania, the United States going into World War I. That's all 1913 stuff. And the rite of spring, in some ways, kind of maybe indirectly kicks it off. Maybe it's a bit of like chaos theory. So, but you can see just in Stravinsky's chart, kind of the love of Mother Russia, the love of more kind of primal, more tribal sort of ethics or aesthetics, and then the kind of Gemini playing with the form and breaking it up and chopping it up. And then over here in Taurus, it's very, very tribal, very primal, right? It's the body. It's getting back into sort of that kind of the Taurian sort of, sort of post-Paleolithic energy. And Uranus in the 12th house is cutting edge, but it's hidden, it's behind the scenes, right? It's very Virgoan, and it did cause a stir. It really caused a stir with people. Let me show you a headline from back then. It's an interesting headline. This is from the New York, I think it's the New York Times, right here. This is what a stir this thing caused. Parisians hiss, new ballet. Russian dancers' latest offering, the consecration of spring, a failure. Not really, wasn't a failure, right? Was not a failure. It turned out to be kind of a monumental event in modern history from a number of different levels. So it says, has to turn up lights. Manager Theater takes this means to stop hostile demonstrations as dance goes on. People were losing their fucking minds in the rite of spring because it was, with all the kind of the atonality and the tribal nature and the tribal drumming, you're getting into their first and second chakra. Man, it was very powerful, extremely powerful. I think there's some chaos theory here, by the way. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to show you this other chart, and this other chart is Stravinsky's chart as it relates to the rite of spring. Okay, so Stravinsky's on the inside here. And what we have is a Pluto-Sun conjunction. So he was really in the midst of a very transformational energy. By the way, not everybody undergoes a Pluto-Sun conjunction in their lifetime. Doesn't always happen because of the way Pluto moves. He did. And at that time, Pluto was transiting his 10th house. So he was having a transformational impact on the world at large, clearly. And extreme, right? There was extreme energy with the Pluto-Sun conjunction. I mean, people were losing their minds. You had to turn the lights on, right? Very extreme. Some people really liked it, but there was an extreme kind of shocking factor to it all. And over here, transiting Sun, Saturn, Mercury on his natal Pluto. How often does that happen? So while Pluto's on his Sun, Saturn, Mercury on his Pluto, of course, we're going to see some of this happen, right? He's going to be essentially kind of this channel or this gateway. Neptune conjunct Venus, that tends to be very creative and very artistic, right? Right there. But it's also squaring off against Venus. So there's a clash. There's a clash in terms of relating, right? What I thought was really fascinating, though, with all this is that, look down here, the true node on that night was at 0 Aries. That is the first day of spring. That is the vernal equinox, spring equinox, right? So, and the moon was at the final degrees of Pisces, 27. But that true node, that is the rite of spring, right there. Now, I don't know if they planned it, if they were using some astrology to, to get into this thing, but it was very interesting. Very interesting that we had the true node in Aries on the night. Now, the night that this premiered was May 29th. May 29th, which of course is under the sign of Gemini, right? Which is why the sun is here and it's getting ready to conjunct his Jupiter in Gemini as well. Jupiter transiting was in Capricorn, which tends to be very conventional. And it was opposing his natal moon, right? Which again, if you look at this from the cultural, the folkloric perspective, the ballet russe, this would be sort of this judgment. Jupiter and Capricorn, sort of the critical forces judging this stuff. Anyway, I just thought it was really interesting. Mars was also in Gemini that night, 29th degree, the anaretic degree. So it's at that weird final degree, which makes it challenging for people to deal with in a lot of ways. So from a cultural perspective, Pluto conjuncting the sun on this night, these Gemini planets, Sun, Mercury, Saturn conjuncting his Pluto, double Pluto effect, and then the true node in Aries, which I thought was really cool, at least from an astrological standpoint. I hope you didn't find that too tedious. Let me stop the share and get back into the chat here. Let's see where we are. Here we go. Into the chat. So does that include, let me see, was he a progressive or an agent of destruction? Stravinsky? I think Stravinsky, I don't know. Stravinsky was ahead of his time. And I just think he was somebody who was, he was a composer first and foremost, you know, first and foremost. And that's all pre-revolution. That's all pre-Bolshevism. I don't think he was a revolutionary radical. I'd love to know how you come up with your topics. They're fun, right? I try to find fun stuff. That's my opinion. We got a little debate going on there. JFK Jr. faked his death. Ah, there we go. That's interesting. Listed May 26th, quite a lot of interesting folks that day. Okay. All right. So what are we? We're at 8:40. Okay. So what I wanted to do, I was going to bring up another chart. Should I? Okay, let me bring up this other chart. And the only reason I'm bringing this chart up is because it's another Gemini birthday. And I thought it was kind of interesting. Let me see if I can track it down. I don't think I'm going to spend a ton of time on it. But here we go. So let me share this. So, okay, so this is Alice Bailey's chart. And Alice Bailey was born on June 16th, 1880. And some of you probably know who she is because you guys are pretty hip. Alice Bailey was a channel. And she was a theosophist. And she had a falling out with the theosophists. Now, Alice Bailey had kind of a history of mental illness, depression. She lives in England. She moves to California. She's from Manchester. Manchester gave us the computer, the bouncing bomb, the Stone Roses, Oasis, and Alice Bailey. And she moves to Los Angeles. And she, during the 20s and 30s, there was a big spiritual scene happening in California, in and around LA. The theosophists eventually go there. They bring Krishnamurti to California. Yogananda shows up in California. There's a lot going on in California during that time. And Alice Bailey shows up there, and she meets this guy named Foster Bailey. And Foster Bailey is a Mason. And Alice Bailey, I think, was working at, like, at that time, the equivalent of a metaphysical bookstore. And it's Foster Bailey, whom Alice Bailey meets and marries, who really transforms Alice Bailey. And she becomes a channel. And she becomes a channel for an entity, a Tibetan master by the name of Jawal Kul, or DK. And it's through DK that Alice Bailey channels her teachings, or the teachings of the New Age and the principles of the New Age. Alice Bailey is, if Blavatsky was the mother of the New Age, Alice Bailey is the child she gave birth to, and then basically wrote the books for the New Age. And the Lucis Trust, which is the publishing company that publishes her books, is still in business today. They still publish those books. They're run out of New York City, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, Lucis Trust is owned and operated by the Rockefeller family. And so we have Jupiter in the ninth house in her chart. The ninth house represents publishing, right? And we have Jupiter here, which is the will, in Aries. And then we have Saturn in the 10th house, also in Aries. So the Jupiter-Saturn conjunction in Aries. And I think the publishing piece is interesting with Jupiter here. Now, Aries would not be considered Lucifer, right? Aries would theoretically be considered sort of the macro or the holistic component that Lucifer theoretically separates out from. Here, this is Mars. And when we talk about Lucifer, we talk about Venus, and Venus being the morning star or the Luciferic star. She doesn't have Venus in Libra. She doesn't have Venus rising, but she does have the moon in Libra, right? She has moon in Libra ruled by Venus. It's not quite in opposition here. But the thing that I thought was really interesting about her chart for me was Mercury. And Mercury in the 12th house in the sign of Cancer, which is incredibly receptive, really receptive. We're talking water sign, water house, deep. And she's got a sextile to Neptune. To me, this is a psychic channel and a psychic flow. And she's got a sextile from Mercury to Uranus, right? And this is different. So she has the two outer planets sextiling. She was tapping into something. She was tapping into something. And I've read some of her books. I read a book one time of hers on groups in the New Age. I got to tell you, it's pretty brilliant. It was pretty brilliant. The way everything was broken down, I was like, wow, this is kind of amazing. Now, I'm not an Alice Bailey acolyte. I don't read her material. You know, I'm not a Luciferian, but I read that book, and I am looking at this from an astrological perspective. And I do believe she was channeling something. I do believe she was in touch with something. Now, whether she was in touch with DK, Tibetan, whether Foster Bailey was in another room talking to her on, shortwave radio, I don't know. I don't think that was really the case. But she was in touch with something. And with Mars on the ascendant, that's really interesting too, because that's Promethean. That's like stealing fire from the gods with Mars and Leo on the ascendant. And the square to Neptune, I think, she was really debilitated. And I think that in a lot of ways, she became very, very dependent upon Foster Bailey. But I just thought that this was a very interesting chart based on Mercury in the 12th house at that degree of Cancer, the 11th degree, puts it in the Scorpionic decan, by the way. And then the sextile to Neptune and sextile to Uranus, which is unconventional communication, right? Uranus, Mercury sextile, unconventional communication. Mercury sextile Neptune, that's communication that has a deep flow. It's not conventional. Interesting chart, very, very interesting. What do you think, Jasper? What do you think of her chart? Alice Bailey. Then she's got that Pluto trine to the moon too. It's a very psychic chart, if you ask me. Incredibly psychic. Now, she may be burning in hell for all we know. That's kind of a joke. But I just wanted to tell you that just wanted to bring this up. I thought it was interesting. All right, let me go back into Chatlandia just for a minute and see what's going on there. Having a book sale. Ani's getting ready to hit the road. For you, Ani. Let's see, what else we have? Thinking the herd of belongings, thinking herd of belongings. All good investigators connect dots. That's what I try to do. Okay, so what I want to do now is I'm going to take you into the realm of the draconic chart. I'm going to talk a little bit about the draconic chart. I want to wet your whistle a little bit because I am going to be doing a webinar on the draconic chart. So I'm going to go into my chart. I'll show you how it's done. Okay, so there I am. That's me. If everyone's, I don't, you know, a lot of people are very guarded about their charts. I really don't care. I've had people, you know, tell me, talk shit about my chart and actually make like character assessments on me, but I really don't care. Right, so that's my chart. And I'll show you how to get to the draconic chart. So here on astro.com, you go into extended chart selection. And then this will pop, right? You go down here and you're going to go to chart type. Okay? And we're going to go and click on at the bottom, draconic chart. That's my new chart from the draconic perspective. So if you looked at my chart, you say, well, all the planets are in the same place. That's true. Different degrees, slightly, and certainly different signs. And the draconic chart is set by the true node in Aries. Remember, we were just talking about the true node in Aries with Stravinsky? I thought it was a good segue. I could have gone there. I just wanted to squeeze in the Bailey chart. Anyway, so all draconic charts are set at the true node in Aries. That is the first degree of the astrological calendar based on Placidus astrology, okay? To me, this is the impetus, theoretically, of the will to incarnate. Some people say this is a trap. I think ultimately we always have a choice. That's just my piece, whether it's a trap or not. To me, this is the intention of incarnation. And then once it's set at 0 Aries, then if it's behind the true node, we subtract your true node. So I have true node in Virgo. So we subtract 0 Aries from 15 Virgo, because that's where my true node is. And everything gets moved back by those number of degrees. If it's in front of your true node, then we move it ahead, we add. But most times it's usually behind. So what happens here is that my ascendant goes from 28 Scorpio to 12 Gemini. I become a 13-degree Aries sun. All my Libra planets become Taurus planets. I still have Pluto and Uranus in the 9th house, but instead of in Virgo and Leo, they're now in Pisces. Mars is in Capricorn instead of Cancer. Saturn's in Cancer, Jupiter's in Cancer instead of Sagittarius and Capricorn, respectively. This is all based on the math between this true node and my true node. Okay, that's how it works. This gets reset, and they all get reset. So this is often considered to be the chart of the soul. And that our charts, our natal charts, are the charts of our personality. And in some cases, there's very little information out there about draconic charts. In some cases, the draconic chart has been likened to our true self in a lot of ways. And that we can understand our truer nature at this level. And then it becomes a weave between the draconic chart and the natal chart. And that's where the interpretation comes in. Now, I've had people, and I have done a number of draconic charts, and they're part of the everything reading. And I've had people whose true nodes are right around 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, at the end of Pisces. So their charts, their draconic chart and their natal chart are almost identical. So you're looking at people whose personal expression and coming from sort of the deeper, you know, sunken places, right? You know, their soul territory are exactly the same. They're exactly the same, one and the same. So what they're moving towards theoretically in this life is theoretically also what they're connecting to at a deeper level, and that there's no disconnect. They're kind of rare, but they do happen. Most people are different. And so then we look at the difference between the two. So when I first really dove into this was probably about 6 years ago. And I started to look at some of these aspects, right? And the thing that really got me was Gemini on the ascendant. And like, I'm perennially curious. You know, somebody earlier tonight said, well, how do you come up with this stuff? Well, I'm just naturally curious, and I want to find interesting things to talk about and things that may have more than one point of view, right? So here we have Gemini on the ascendant, you know, coming at it from the draconic perspective. And I also feel like, and this is just, again, knowing who I am and what I've, you know, people will say, oh, you know, because sometimes I talk about touchy stuff or controversial things or things that might get me in trouble or hot water. And sometimes they have, actually. And I don't want to get into it, but they have. And people will say, oh, wow, you're really brave. I never really thought of it that way. I don't really think in those terms. Like if you go into my natal chart, my sun is in Virgo. So I'm just trying to help people. But that's kind of my calling. I want to help people with sun in Virgo. But beneath that, I've got this sun in Aries here. And it's like, you know, if that's really the case and I'm unconscious of it or I'm not aware of it, and that's very Aries-like in some ways. Aries isn't aware of like the things that it just does it, right? So I don't have that same kind of perspective. So I think that this might have something to do with it. And I could go into this deeper and get into, you know, more of the kind of, how do I say this, personal aspects, but I won't for now. But I will get into a contemporary aspect. That's over here. See that? That's the 11th house. That's where you are right now. You're in the 11th house. And what do I have over here? Well, I've got Taurus, which is physical manifestation. In my natal chart, it's Libra. So it tends to be air communication. This is physical. Well, guess what I'm doing? In October, on the weekend of the 11th, 12th, 13th, 14th, right around there, that weekend, I'm having an event here in the Hill Country in Texas. I'm having an 11th house event where you can get physical. That's right. If you are interested in attending this event, I'm going to have more information on my website. So you can come to Texas, come to the Hill Country. I've got a bunch of great activities that I'm getting ready to get planned. We're going to be doing some archery. We're going to hit Enchanted Rock. We're going to be doing some kayaking. We're going to have some workshops, some webinars, some seminars, live broadcasting. We're going to have a movie night. It's going to be kick-ass and fun. You know, we're going to have Texas barbecue. We're going to have Tex-Mex food, vegetarian options. You'll be, if you're a vegetarian, you'll have a vegetarian option. It's going to be fun. You know what it's going to be like? It's going to be like a family reunion, right? So you're part of this family. A lot of you people are. You show up here every Sunday night. You come, you know, 3-4 times a week. It's your opportunity to meet everybody else. I'm going to limit this thing to about 50 people. I'm trying to make it as affordable as I can. But I've got to pay people to come out. I'm going to have some speakers. Emily's going to be there. Heather from Astrology is going to be there. You know, Ra Castaldo, he's coming out. You know, got a few more people I try to sort out here. It's going to be fun. That's it, right? 11th house gets physical. I should put that on. That's a little too. No, the event is, we're in the hill country in Texas, so we got to be a little undercover. And it's harvest moon in the hill country. It's going to take place in the harvest moon. So this is my, my draconic chart, manifesting. So I'll have more information about that this week. I'm tying up a few of the commitments. We're getting a few things together, right? That's going to happen. Once I do that, once I cost everything out, there'll be a sign-up page. Go over to my website. You'll be able to get there from there, and throw down a deposit. Come out and have a good time. It's gonna be a lot of fun. A lot of fun. You get to meet people. You get to learn a few things. Do some things you've never done before, hopefully, and get into the spirit of the hill country. So again, this is the basics of the draconic chart, the chart of the soul, and you can do that. I just showed you how to do that. And I'll be doing a webinar on this in July, okay, so that we can actually explore more of this together. And I can work with you individually on your charts, and we can explore more of the ramifications. We get into the weed between the natal and the draconic chart, okay? All right, you get out of the share. Let me get back here. Let me check in with you guys. Touchy vegans. Born on a harvest moon. Why don't you show on up? The Crimmies will be there too. The Crimmies will be there too. Mojo Ma, I just went to Astro come do my draconic chart. Listen, choose if you know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. You know what you're doing. So Joe's in our chart here, in our chat here tonight, and I just wanted to just throw out some love and a prayer to our good friend Joe, who has a hard time in life. And Joe, I want you to be around with us for as long as you can, and we want you here. So, from my heart to your heart, I think from a lot of other hearts to yours, I want you to hang in here and don't give up, okay? And try to get out to the hill country in October. So there, Robert. Oh yes, oh yes. We got the humdingers. That'll be great. That'll be totally great. Love to see you guys. Humdinger Productions. All right, I'm on out of here tonight. I'm on out of here. 86 people watching. Hey, go on over to Facebook. Rob set up a page over there. If you want to join, go on over there and it's the 11th house. So, we're taking the party offline now over on the Facebook side of things. And I'll be posting over there. I'll be posting tonight's show over there and other chart stuff. And we'll see how it goes. It's the first group that I've ever done. And 11th house Rob decided he wanted to do it. So I'm like, okay. You're 11th house, Rob. I've got a show called the 11th house. I think you're the guy. Let's tee it up. So when you're over there, say hi to Rob. Rob Chopra. All right, I'm on out of here. It's 9 o'clock. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to say what's possible. I want to thank everybody for showing up tonight. Okay? Thank you for showing up. It's always great. I wouldn't have a show. I wouldn't be doing this without you. Whether you're in the chat room or whether you're on the other side of this computer screen or whether you're not even in a body and you're kind of hanging around and checking things out, wouldn't have a show without you. And you wouldn't have a show without others either. Like you've got your own show. Every day is your show. And you are the actor, the director, the producer, the starring role, the supporting cast, to the best of your ability. Hopefully you also have a supporting cast, but you're all those things. So remember, whoever's showing up, however they show up, thank them too. And sometimes that's not easy. Sometimes people show up in ways that make us really uncomfortable. And sometimes those are the people you need to thank the most. All right, I'm out of here. Use your head to discern what's real, your heart to step what's possible. I'm Robert Phoenix. I'll be back tomorrow with 15 minutes of flame. Jasper says good night as well. Have a Have a superior Monday. I'll see you then.